we have the host with us. So first of all, I would just briefly want to introduce HR Lab to you. So HR Lab is a startup in recruitment consulting space, and my name is Dinesh Pagaria. I am the co-founder of HR Lab, and we, apart from recruitment, what we do in recruitment is we help companies in hiring good resources for them, and basically focusing on finance sector, CAs, MBAs, and all. Apart from this, we are also into mentoring. So we mentor CA students, and that is an initiative, and we do it for free. We do not charge anything for the mentoring. We also have around 75 to 80 CAs associated with us, who, as a way to give back to the society, help us in mentoring CA students. So without any further delay, I would want to hand over it to Sneha Motwani. She's the host for today. Sneha is a chartered accountant, and she is currently working with EY in corporate tax in Mumbai. So over to you, Sneha.
Thank you, Jinesh. Thank you for introducing as well. Hi, good morning, everyone, and hope you're all doing well and keeping safe. So now, since you are aware what have we gathered here for, I'll take this moment to introduce the guest for the day, Anuj Maheshwari. He is the person who has made it to the US, currently working with Goldman Sachs. And as we go ahead in the session, we'll get to know about more about his journey. Welcome, Anuj. I welcome you on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for sparing time and coming and joining us.
Thanks, Neha. This is like a really great opportunity for me as well. So thank you so much to you and to your team.
Thank you so much. So we would go ahead and start with the session. Before we directly go ahead, let's start with Anuj. Would you start with telling us something about your CA journey? Precisely, if I say about your articleship experience and how did it really start?
So, after completing my 12th with commerce, I started for studying for the CPT, and I started in Indore itself. And after passing the CPT, I gave the IPCC both groups in first attempt. And right after that, I joined a mid-sized firm in Indore. And over there, I worked for the whole of my articleship. And my time over there, I worked in audit, both like all kinds of audit, statutory, stock audit, internal audit, and for different kind of clients as well. And apart from that, we had taxation, including tax audits and tax return filing, and did some work in project financing as well. And apart from that, and then I think I appeared for my CA final exams in May 16. I appeared for both groups and luckily passed both of them.
This is relatable to for every chartered accountant. This is what we go through usually. So, Anuj, what I understand is the usual norm is either once you qualify CA is either to get into a big four or get into the industry in some cases or get into practice. What attracted you to the US?
So even during my school years, I always wanted to go abroad and study, uh, and like the foreign universities kind of attracted me. So that was like one of the pulling factors for me to go there. But how it started is that after completing the 12th into the CPT and into the IPCC, we have subjects like financial management and SFM in final. These are the subjects which attracted me towards finance, and I wanted to know what I can like study more or get an expert knowledge towards it. And then I came to know about CFA. And when I was researching how I can do CFA and everything, I realized that there are certain foreign universities which offer CFA similar curriculum. It's not like that you do graduation from these universities, so you become CFA directly. You have to give an exam separately for that. But this was like a starting step for me. I did more research, contacted a counselor, and then I got to know what my other options could be. And that's how like I got to know that there's a course called Masters in Finance, which I can do right after my CA. And apart from that, there are like two lines of thoughts usually. First is that I heard that back in the time that it's very hard for people once you get into job to then go out and study. And secondly, it's best scenario if you are currently studying a lot, then you can go and do your masters and keep on continuing your studies and become an expert and get like expert knowledge into those fields. So I think those were the things that basically attracted me towards US and towards pursuing masters rather than going for a job right after my CA.
Got it. Got it. So, Anuj, starting from first things first. So, which exams did you take up for for getting your master's in the desired university? And what means how long did you take to prepare for those exams? What did that cost you? Could you please help us with that?
Sure, definitely. So I'll talk specifically about the US. Although like all over the world, these exams are very common, and like all over the world, be it Singapore, Canada, Australia, like they accept similar kind of exams. But I'll specifically stick to the US universities. Over here, there are like two types of exams that you have to give. First is related to your aptitude, and second is related to your English proficiency. Because anyways, like your course and curriculum and everything over here in US is going to be in English language. So let's go with that first. So for that, there are two exams specifically. First is TOEFL and second is IELTS. And these are like interchangeable exams. You don't need to give both of them. And over in these exams, what they test is they test your speaking, your listening, your writing proficiency of English. And you basically have to show it to the universities that you can converse well in English, you can understand in English, like whatever coursework they will have, you'll be able to understand that, and you'll be able to excel in those universities. Second is then the most important exams are the aptitude ones. There are two exams. One is called GRE and the second is called GMAT. These are like pretty similar to what we have in India for MBA exams, which is the CAT exam. They have like quantitative sections, verbal sections, and reasoning sections. Um, these are like, again, you don't have to give both GRE and GMAT. You can choose the one you want. Uh, One thing is specific is that like the courses which us chartered accountants might want to do are usually offered by business school in US, and these business schools sometimes prefer GMAT specifically for MBA, but for master's courses even GRE can be taken. Like in my case, I gave GRE and luckily got a good score. As far as the cost is concerned for these exams, each exam cost around 15,000 Indian rupees, and apart from that, there are like coaching fees that you might have to pay if you take coaching. It's preferable to do that because you don't really know what kind of questions will come in. There is not enough material sometimes which is available, which can be provided by the coaching staff. And apart from that, when I talk specifically about the aptitude exams, there is like math, which is very important, and vocabulary, which like these are the two things that even the coaching institutes try to focus most on.
Got it. Got it. One more thing I would request to highlight the time you need to prepare for these exams.
So in my case, I actually started preparing for these exams while I was preparing for my CA final as well. So what I did was I took some time. I took like approximately 3 months of proper coaching, like 2 hours daily, and and after that I took like 1.5 months specifically dedicated for just these exams, and that is for GRE. For TOEFL, I took like just 15 days because like since it's based on English proficiency and I had given all my past exams in English for my schools or for CA. So I was pretty confident about that. So 15 days was enough for that.
Good. So once we appear for such exams, we have a score in hand. The next process is to apply to the universities. Will you help us with the process? How do we do that? What is the fees involved?
So before you go on to apply to the universities, you should basically know what universities you want to target. And for that, you should basically know what course you want to target. So people with experience might want to go for an MBA, but people who are like want to go to US right after their graduation might want to go for master courses. MBA usually requires some kind of experience in US, some kind of full-time experience. I want to highlight that articleship experience is not counted as a full-time experience because you are studying while working. So you need to have something right after your graduation. So that could be counted as full-time experience. So MBA usually requires that. But for master's courses, it's not a requirement. If you have it, that's good. If you don't have it, then you don't need to worry about it. And as for my university go where I was, University of Rochester, for master courses, they didn't require uh, work experience, full time of work experience, but our articleship experience does count when they try to evaluate your profile. As terms of applying, once you have identified your course, you try to identify what universities you want to apply to, and you look for target schools. You look for some options, like for example, you may want to go a bit ambitious and may want to apply for universities that may be out of your reach, and that, for example, that means that the top universities, you think that your GRE score is not that high, you don't have like a great profile, so you choose either an ambitious college, and then you chose like some safe college and some colleges that you think that you can make into if you can push hard. Now, once you have this list ready, then you try and go to individual websites of these universities. And there is usually a portal for incoming students who can go over there and apply to these colleges. And when you apply to it, you have to have certain documents with you, which includes your transcripts, degree, your resume. And apart from that, there are two other things specifically for colleges, and it can change depending on university. First is SOP, statement of purpose. Some universities give out a question and you have to write out an answer and submit it. But some universities just give you an article saying that just give us an idea why you want to join us, why you want to join our university specifically, and why you want to do this course. So you have to basically explain within a word limit why you want to do that. And second thing is a letter of recommendation. Some universities ask for two, some universities ask for three. And what happens is that in my case, I was doing articleship and I was doing BCom. So what I did was I took two letter of recommendations from professors at the university, and I took one from my CA partner at my firm. Apart from that, uh, you have to pay the fees. So that is one restraint why you can't apply to every university in the world. Each university charges some amount of fee. It can start with $50 USD, and it can reach as high as $150 to $200. So like you have to select which universities you want to get into, because you don't want to waste your money. You don't want to apply to such universities where you know that you don't have chance, you don't meet your profile, you don't meet the basic requirements. So you actually go into every university and then look at their basic requirements, and then you apply accordingly. And like in India, we don't have like a common portal where you go and apply and you get admission. It's more like you have to go to individual website. So in my case, I actually chose like 8 universities all over the globe, 6 in US, 1 in Canada, 1 in Singapore. And I had few ambitious ones and few safe options where I knew that I would get into, and some really good ones that I really wanted to get into. And I thought that if I pushed hard, then I would be able to get that. So I think that is the main process of applying to a university.
Got it, got it. If you don't mind me asking, Anuj, where did you end up? In the ambitious ones or in the safer ones?
So I would say that the safer ones were the ones that reached out the first, and like I got my admission letters for them very early. But I was looking up for my ambitious one, and my most ambitious one was MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So that's a technology institute, but they do have a business school. But I think it was too ambitious of me to apply over there. Like they required some very high profile. But I got into my second the second school in my priority list, which is the University of Rochester. It was ranked fifth in US at that time for finance, and I really liked some of their courses, some of their professors, and I think I was very happy with that university.
Thank you. If you could help us with the approximate idea, like how much fees will these courses or in these universities will have to pay?
So I'll give you a general idea of how the universities in US charge. So if you get into a state university, which is basically sponsored by the government, then the fees can be low. But don't worry about the education quality. If like those state universities fall in higher ranks, like there are different rankings available. Financial Times gives out a ranking. There is a ranking for US News. So all these rankings help you estimate like what is a good college. So if it's a state-run college, the fees might be between the range of $25,000 to $30,000, and this is I'm talking about per year. And this is proper just tuition fees. Your living expenditure, your travel expenditure, and food and everything is completely different. But if you're going to a private university, as I was, and those form the majority of the top schools, those are a bit high because the B schools charge a lot of money. And as for my course, after scholarship, I my course fee was around $50,000. Before scholarship, it was around $75,000. And scholarship is one thing that you can get if you have a very good profile. There are other ways to get scholarship as well. Some universities, if you plan well ahead, what you can do is you can attend certain events which the universities organize to get you more scholarships. You can participate in those events. There are some competitions which might go on, and apart from that, you can reach out to professors of the university and ask like, is there something that we can do that can get us more scholarship? That might involve the university professor asking you to write up some research work or do some paperwork, or maybe um, like proper like they might ask you if you have done some work prior to coming over here, that the professor might be able to leverage in future. In that way, the professor can help you get more scholarship. But on an average, the fees can range from $50,000 to 60 to $75,000 for a private school.
Got it, got it. Just one point. We did talk about the exams we'll have to take, but what score range we'll have to reach into so that we qualify for these universities?
So, well, when a university is trying to like assess your profile, what they look at is different things. They look at your bachelor's, they look at if you have any internship experience or any prior work experience, they look at your score. And also what they look at is whether you have done any activities or any other co-curricular, that what we call in India, and while you were in college. So when they are evaluating those things, what they look is that, for example, in my case, I applied right after, like I was going right after my CA. I don't have any work experience apart from my architecture. So what I needed was a strong boost from my GRE score. So I needed a very strong score. GRE is a exam which has like total marks of 340. So my target was to get above 320 at least. And if you have like good experience in India, like maybe say for 1 year or 2 year, then you can afford a lower score, because when they'll assess your profile, they look at it holistically, and they'll see that, oh, this guy has good experience, and this
Hmm,
guy has got like a very good score, not an extremely good score, but a good score. So that
hmm,
can that so that experience can be leveraged over there. So
hmm.
in my case, since I didn't had an experience, I had to go for like high score, and I got my desired score was above 320, and I got 325. And like every university have like a target range what they target. So when you look at your target universities, they give out these basic requirements that they want from you, and those might involve like a minimum score that they want from you in these exams. So once you have those minimum scores, then you should try and get above those scores, and or even higher if you don't have if you feel that your profile may lack like work experience or something else.
Got it, got it. Anuj, one important part of your journey was the CA. How did that contribute in your career in US?
Well, it contributed a lot, but one thing is for certain that I would like to clear that you cannot get a job in US just based on your CA. You need to have something, either good work experience from your company in India, or if you're coming from undergrad, then you have to do certain course, maybe a master's or an MBA. As for my thing, like CA helped me, I think, at a lot of times. Firstly, was when I was getting my admissions done. I was not a chartered accountant when I was applying, but I was still a CA final student. So even that helped my case, because they realized that, oh, he is a CA final student, he's studying for these courses. And I had highlighted those in my profile that, okay, these are the courseworks that I'm doing currently. And I'm going to be qualifying for this or appearing for the exam in the next like 6 months or so. but the maximum help that came up to me was when I was applying for jobs. So when you come over here, you are competing with two types of students. One are the domestic students who belong to the US, and one are the international students who come from all over the world and compete with you as an international candidate to get the jobs. When you go to the when you go to US as an international candidate, you face like much more problem because the domestic students don't need to get their visa done. They already have the right to work in the country. So that's why the competition for, you can say the supply for the opportunities is less, but the demand from our students is high. So you're competing with other students who are coming from India as well and from other countries as well. So now what happens is when you are compared against these students who are along with you, uh, they might not have the chartered accountancy name behind them. So how does that distinguishes me? So let me tell you that when a recruiter looks at your profile, they see that under professional qualification, you are listing chartered accountancy, which is CP equivalent in India. And what they realize is that you have done it along with your bachelor's. So they think that the person does have much more capabilities. They are like, you can say, much more well versed with specific coursework. They know that this person will have expert knowledge in certain fields. And so that's where like the first thing helps the recruiter when you're applying for the jobs. But specifically, when you apply to multinational companies who have offices in India and all over the world, they actually know what a chartered accountant is. For example, if you apply for a role in Big Four over here, they obviously know what a chartered accountant is because they have like a team of thousands of chartered accountants in India. So
Hmm.
they know what does that mean. They know how hardworking we are and what qualifications do we have, how our knowledge comes up. So they have an idea of what it and how it happens. And when it comes to about some certain big investment banks, they do have like chartered accountants in their ranks. Like a lot of chartered accountants work in my company as well. So when you apply and when you talk to people while you are interviewing, they realize that you are a chartered accountant and they have already worked with you. And let me tell you that our fraternity of chartered accountants all over the world have made us chartered accountants very proud because they have done such work over here that our name is very it's spoken with a lot of respect, and they know that we can do well over here, and that is something that helps you. But I would like to put a disclaimer again that chartered accountancy is not something that can get you a job over here. It can surely get you an edge over other students who are applying for the same position.
Thank you, Anuj, for giving this push to the chartered accountants with a disclaimer that we'll need to be additionally competitive. With this, we'll break here for 2 minutes. We will rejoin using the same link. Anuj, are we good to go ahead?
Yep, definitely.
Okay. So my next question would be, what are the options available for chartered accountants there in US? Like, how can we make it there?
So basically, for US, there are two routes for any person to come to US from India. First is the basic, which is come here, study, get a job. Second is get a job in India in a multinational company that might have a US office, work over there, and get your company to transfer you to US on different kinds of visas. So let me explain you the first one, which is the one through which I came. So that is the F1 visa, which is the student visa. And the process for that is pretty simple. Once you get an admission into a university, after the interviews are done and you have submitted all your documents, submitted the deposit fee into the university gives you a document called I-20. And in whole of your student life in United States, that I-20 document is one of the most important documents of your life. If you lose that, then that's not a good thing. But like that is one important document, and that is the document on behalf of which you get visa to get into US. That document has information about what course you are going to pursue, what university you are going to pursue, what will be the average cost of that, and that the university has actually admitted you into the institution. After you have got that document, what you do is you apply for visa. And let me tell you that the process is not very straightforward. So what I did was I took help of visa counselor, and what they helped me was they prepared my application for visa, guided me through all the steps, how to pay the fees for the visa. What I remember vaguely is that the fees is, I think, approximately 20,000 Indian rupees for the F1 visa. And once that is done, you have to come to the US consulate at different locations in India and go over there, give an interview. And the interviewer over there basically judges whether you are a fit, you are a good fit for the role that, for the course that you are going to pursue, and whether that university is legitimate and whether you are legitimate. And second thing that they want to know is that whether you will be coming back after doing your course. So now, like, obviously nobody wants to directly come back after doing your course over there, because you have spent a lot of money, you want to recover the money, you want to save, and maybe you want to live over here as well. But the point is that when you are applying for a student visa, what you should remember is that you're going as a student and not as an immigrant. So when you are going as a student, the country expects that you will study, you may get some good experience, and then you will come back. So what you have to show is that you have ties to your country, and you will eventually come back once you have done your course and got some experience. So these are the two things that they evaluate, and these are the two grounds that they specifically mention that they will be asking you questions regarding. So that is one route. You go get your F1 visa done, come to US, study, and this F1 visa basically gets you 1 to 3 years of free work visa as well. So basically, there is a degree called STEM, which is a designation given to certain universities and certain courses. And if you have that STEM degree, then you have 3 years of work visa. And if you don't, then you only have 1 year of work visa. And while you are doing that free work visa from student route, your company will apply for H1B visa for you, which is the work visa. And then your F1 visa will get transferred to H1B. So that is one route, and that is the route which is the most popular among students and among people coming over here. Second route is directly coming from or with your employer. Now, when you come with your employer, what happens is that first is that you have to get a job in India in a company which might have US office. And second is that you might want to build your profile and work hard in that company so that your employer is willing to transfer you from India to US. Now that involves sufficient cost to the employer. So you need to make sure that you are a standout performer and that you can handle the US clients. For example, the big four companies, like say EY. EY has offices all over the world. They have offices in India. They have offices in US. They have like specific offices in India which are serving US clients. So if you're working in one of those offices, then the chances of you coming to US are very high, because you can show that you are a great employee over there. But again, the route is through H1B. So, or L1 if you are in a managerial position. But like managerial position comes in like most probably 3 years or at least 5 years down the line in your job. And that can be one possibility. But speaking of young chartered accountants who have like less than that experience, the way for them would be H1B again. Now, H1B is a lottery system. It's not like that you apply for it and you get it. It's like they have specific number of seats available and much more larger number of applications coming in. Everybody must have heard of TCS and Infosys. These are like the companies that take the biggest chunk of these H1B visas. What happens is that they have limited number of seats, say 60,000 seats. And out of these 60,000, 20,000 are fixed for students who are coming over here to US doing their masters. So for the people who are directly applying from India, they have just 40,000 seats left, and they are competing with people from all over the world. It's not just specific for India. So for those 40,000 seats, you have people coming in and applying for everywhere. So the chances of getting picked are less. But if you come to US and if your visa is getting applied from here, then your chances of getting picked are higher, because first is that there is the cap of 20,000 specifically for people who are still pursuing their masters in here. And apart from that, once if you are not picked on those 20,000, then you also get a chance at the next 40,000 as well. So you basically get a double shot during your H1B approval when when you come over here and study. Now, as far as the cost is involved, when you come for F1 visa, your cost is for the visa that you get, and there's no renewal cost. It's not like that every year you have to pay the fee. It's just a one-time fee when you get the visa. But when it comes to H1B, you don't have to pay any fees, but you cannot apply by yourself as well. You need to have an employer and who is going to sponsor you and file your petition on behalf of you. An employer has to pay those fees, and those fees involves fees to the US government and fees to the lawyers who are going to file your petition in US. So it's not like it cannot be a trade-off. Like US government is very strict in those circumstances. They do check like that the firm is transferring the money and it's not the employee transferring money to the firm and the firm then paying for that thing. It's like you need to have a sponsor, and that sponsor basically files on behalf of you. That's why you need an employer already. Now,
Hmm.
many people ask me this question that how can we get a job in US directly from India? So let me tell you that I have never heard of that case that somebody has got a job in US directly from India. It has always been like they have been working for a multinational company in India, and that company either transferred them or they transferred them to maybe their stakeholders or to some other kind of company. So that's how it works. You need to have that company contact in India, which can at least get you to a company contact in US or maybe to the same company and then transfer you over there. You cannot individually go and apply for that visa. So these are the two routes. And apart from that, there is one more route. If you can find an American girl and marry her.
Thanks. But thanks for breaking this myth as well. There isn't a direct route. Either it has to be through the student route or find a multinational employer and get yourself transferred to the US.
Yes.
Right, Anuj?
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
Moving ahead, Anuj, now this brings me to the monetary benefits. One reason people want to move to the US is how well do they make it there. So, would you please help us with the approximate range that what money do people make? Is it good enough and do they save enough to survive?
Surely safe enough to survive. I have survived so far. And apart from that, when I talk about the range, I think it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on your prior experience, your profile, the college you have pursued, the college where you have studied, and apart from that, where you want to work into, and even your geographical locations. First, let's go from the backside. Geographical location. It is a well-known fact that New York City area and the California belt, Seattle including, these are the places in the United States which have the highest paid employees. Apart from that, there are tier two cities like Chicago, Boston as well, where people get good enough packages. But there are certain smaller cities as well, because like US domestically is very big country. It's almost I think 1.5 or twice the size of India, but population is very less. So they do have like smaller
Hmm.
cities with much demand as well. But again, the pay in those smaller cities is less, but less compared to what you can make in New York City or in California. Now, apart from geographical location, what matters is where you want to work into. Say, for example, if you want to work into a big four, then I guess your starting package can be on an average 60 to $70,000. But if you want to get into an investment bank, then you can get upwards of 75,000, $80,000. And if you are that talented enough that you can actually get an investment banking role or investment banking analyst role over here, then you may actually make $100,000 as an initial start. I've seen that happen, and that actually happens with people as well. But one thing is there that a lot of different factors affect this thing. For example, you can say the market. How is the market? How is the economy doing? And how is like the government's policy for immigration? Say, for example, 4 years back when I was searching, the Trump government came in, and the immigration policy was not clear with the employees. So a lot of big employers who were hiring a lot of international candidates stopped hiring international candidates. So you can say that the job opportunities reduced by a lot, but the candidates number did not. The students who were going to the US was increasing, and opportunities were getting less. So what has happened is that at that time, we got very less opportunities, and we had to look for even roles which could pay us less, but at least give us an opportunity to stay in the country or at least get our visa done. So uh, what happened was that a lot of us, like my friends and me, we started looking for whatever we can get. And apart from that, it can involve you working for a startup or maybe for like very smaller organization. But as a start, it's always good. When you start a new job, what you look for is something which makes your choices. As for my case was I was looking for learning. I was looking for experience where I can learn a lot. So I chose a startup. The money was less at the beginning, but I knew that I would be able to learn a lot. I would be able to do a different streams of work. I would be doing corporate finance. I would be doing portfolio management, and I wanted that kind of an experience. I wanted to see how each of these fields go about, and that helped me actually in understanding what the industry works into. I was working for earlier before Goldman Sachs for a private business lender, and after that, what happened with me was that my visa was not issued. My company promised me something and they did something else. That is a problem with smaller organizations and their accountability as well. So I had to look for better opportunities and a company that would sponsor me. So I can say that on an average, you get to earn uh, within 3 to 4 years of you working over here, you should ideally reach six figures, which is like $100,000. But even if not, then you will be at least close to $80,000 over here. And that also like accounts for the cost of living as well. And when we talk about cost of living, then the geographical location comes into play. If you're working in New York City or in California, the expenditures are very high. You have to pay higher rents, you have to pay higher costs for the groceries. Even the petrol prices are very high, same as everywhere in the world. Like the metro cities will have higher cost of living compared to the other cities as well. So that accounts for like approximately like uh, I think 1,200 to $1,500 a month of rent, and your living expenditure can again go from like $500 to $1,000 a month. And considering that is for like me in New York City, and that is good enough for anybody. Like you can reduce your expenses obviously by living in a maybe a smaller apartment, maybe living much farther than the city, increasing your travel time. But like these are the certain factors that one should look into, and I think that is I would say for the pay skill that we have.
Okay, I think Sneha has dropped off, so I will continue from here. So if you could help us with, some what are the pros and cons of, getting into US? Pros is obviously a good scale that, like you said, $100,000 comes to around 70 lakhs in Indian terms. So that is something. Any other pros and some cons if you could highlight?
Well, you have highlighted already the biggest pro that people look for when they come to US. That is the currency conversion, and obviously you earn in dollars. You get to spend in dollars, and you also get to spend in Indian rupees. That is one of the biggest factors for people to come to US. Apart from that, I would say is the opportunity for growth and work culture. So when you say growth opportunity, that then I would say that over here you are at the center. Like if I talk about myself, I'm working in New York City, and New York City is the financial hub of the whole world, and so that gives you like much more opportunities, much more different kinds of work, much more different kinds of technological changes that are being brought in. That brings up more opportunities for you, and even the growth aspect, even for like smaller companies or even for bigger companies, you have like much larger growth prospects. And then comes the work culture. Like I haven't worked in India, so I don't have the first hand experience of like a full time work experience in India. But from what I've heard from my friends over here who used to work in India and then came over here in US, they tell me that one thing that they see as a difference is that they get appreciated a lot over here, even for like smaller tasks that they do at their job. They get appreciation for that. Like your manager would say thanks for even the work that you are required to do. And like and then comes the bonus parts and everything else that is completely different. But the appreciation you get for your work, the work culture that we have over here in US, That is something that people look for, and that is something that makes people stick to the country. And I think growth, money, and the culture. I think these are the three things that are the biggest pros of coming to US. But I think we should also highlight the cons of coming to US.
Right.
The first biggest and the single factor that affects people over here is their visa, and it is very difficult to get your visa done. Because the processing, when you talk about what's next after you get the work visa done, what's next after that? Because work visa also had a time validity. It's not like that you get it for your whole life. Like H1B visa, it gets issued for 3 years, and uh, then you can get it extended for 3 years. But what after those 6 years? What can you do? So you can stay after those 6 years if your green card is filed by your company. Now, green card filing is expensive, and the companies do it for the employees for whom they feel that they will give them that value in future. Now, green card processing right now is upwards of 15 to 16 years. And let me tell you that I do have like a lot of people in US now, a lot of friends, a lot of family members, and this is one of the biggest worry factor for everyone, that when will they receive their green cards. I have somebody who has come to US in 2003, has been working tirelessly, came here, studied, working, and now got their H1B done and everything, but are still waiting for their green card. So it's like already 17 years since they came, and there is no chance of them getting that green card in next 5 years as well, as what they say. So let me tell you that that is one of the biggest cons of living over here, or that constant fear of what will happen to you if that green card is rejected, because you don't get that acceptance very early. You just get an acceptance that okay, your green card is under process, so on the basis of that you can stay in the country and work. But it can get rejected anytime, it can get accepted anytime. So that is a consistent fear that people have, and that is something that people should look into. And when we say that green card, like for example, like you can say that the government is changing, but what is the point is that there are like lakhs of application already in the backlog.
Mm.
So like it's not going to get cleared in a year. They are not going to issue like a lot of, they must have made promises or something. But let me tell you that there are a lot of backlog. There is a lot of misconception outside as well, that green card is like easy or something like that. But when you are working over here on your H1 visa, then the wait time is very long. It's like 15, 16 years. And what it does, it places a restriction on you. What is that restriction? Is that work visa which you get is specific to that company. Obviously, you can change jobs, but you will be only working for that company. If suppose you are in India, you are working for a company, you can start something of your own as well. Like you can do something else, you can maybe start a small business or do that or work for that as well. But over here you can't do that. You have to stick to just your company. You don't have any other backup option apart from your job. So that is something that is the biggest con. And obviously you miss out on a lot of things. This country is like halfway around the world from India. Like the time difference is huge, like it's 9 hours now. And you miss out on a lot of things. You miss out on a lot of family events, a lot of friends events as well, lots of weddings. You can't obviously come every time. It can be because of the money issue, the flight prices are not that cheap. Then comes like you may not get vacation, or your visa situation is like that you can't really come. So like these are the biggest pros and cons.
Right, right. So like we discussed about, how you landed up into a job in Goldman Sachs. So now when you look back, what are some, achievements and some lows that you felt during your this entire journey, if you could highlight those?
So if I have to highlight, then the first one would be getting my CA done. So there is one very interesting thing. I actually uh, didn't wait for my CA results to come out before coming to US.
Okay.
Um After May 16 exam, I left for US on July 12th, and CA exam results were going to come on July 16th. I had this thought, and because I took admission in November 2015, 6 months before my CA final exam, and I had paid my deposit. Like my family was questioning me, are you sane, or are you sane? Do you think you can do it? Do you think you'll pass the CA exam in first attempt? And will you not give exam if you don't pass? So these were certain things, but I took care of them. Like I took charge of the situation. I knew I had to get it cleared in the first attempt. Otherwise, I have no chance. So I tried and I prepared like that in the last 6 months before the exam. After the exam happened, I was pretty confident that I will be able to make it. I came to US uh, in July and sorry, and after 5 days, I got the result that I have become a chartered accountant. And it was like late at night. Like I couldn't sleep for the whole night. The result came out like around 3 a.m. my time. And I was like so excited. Like I was very sad at that day as well because I didn't have my friends, my family with me to celebrate that such a big occasion for me. Like for every chartered accountant that we have on this call, I think they can remember the day when they became chartered accountant. And the happiness that you get from that thing is like immense. So that is one thing. And the second thing would be when I got my job in Goldman Sachs. My first initial years working for my previous company were very hard because the pay was not that great. And again, my visa issues were there. The company promised something, they did something. So getting into Goldman Sachs was a dream always. When I was in doing CA as well, like Goldman Sachs was a dream company for me. And when I got into it, got a good package. That is like that basically started something very special for me. My past 1 year has been one of the best years of my life in like past 4 years or 5 years, I can say, and that's all because of getting that one job.
Right, right. Okay, fair enough. Now, after this US life, if at all anybody wishes to come back to India, as in for whatever reason they do not get green card or anything, what are the opportunities which are there for people who are now migrating again from US to India back?
So this thought is even on my mind as well. Like everybody who comes here wants to understand what they can do if at all something doesn't work over here, or if something changes back in India, back home, that you have to go back. Now, as a chartered accountant, what you do is like every step you take over here is towards that one target that you want to achieve. That is the one field that you specifically want to get into. Now, what you do is you basically identify your field and you try to work towards it. You try to get experience, relevant experience over here, which you can use back in India. Now there are like two situations. One is that if you work for a multinational company, what can happen is that company can transfer you back to India for a similar role or for a different role. That could be like a very safe option for you, so that when you come back, you already have a job. The pay may not be as great as you can get if you can like come back and search outside, but that is like a safe option. Safe options does not always give you a lot of rules, but this that will give you a security. Now, the second option is that you prepare for that relevant profile that you want to get in India. And the experience you get over here will be relevant over there. For example, if you are working in investment management. Now, investment management is an industry which is common all across the world. The systems used are same, the processes used are same. So the experience that you get over here might be very much relevant to what you can do over there. Now, what you have to make sure you do is that you kind of get that edge with yourself by learning something new from here and then going back to India, so that when you offer yourself to employees over there, they can understand that, oh, this guy can offer me something extra than what I can get in the local market. So that is something that you should look into. You should build your profile in accordingly, and like always be on a lookout for opportunities which can help you boost your profile if you have to come back to India.
Right, right. So just coming from US doesn't mean that we have wildcard entry into all the jobs. You
Yes,
should get a relevant work ex in US, only then you will be able to get a land up into a good job in India as well. Okay.
yes, definitely.
Hmm. So that's all the questions that I had in mind. So now we are opening it the session to everyone. So if you want to ask any questions to the audience, you can put it in the chat box, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. And we only have 5 minutes left. Um, So CPA and CFA are, a thing that are lot being discussed. So if you could throw some light on CPA and CFA, how they can be used to go into US.
So basically, CPA and CFA, they both are they are not US degrees. They are certification courses. CPA is very similar to chartered accountancy course. It is like chartered accountants of the US, and you study accountancy, taxation, and local laws and everything else. Uh, when you do CPA, what you are specifically doing is that you want to get your career into either accountancy or either into taxation here in US. And when you are doing CFA, which is for the financial analyst, then you actually want to get into the investment industry. Now, both of these are offered by different institutes, which are not universities. You cannot actually come to US to just pursue these two because these are self-study courses offered by institutes and not universities. You cannot get a US student visa to get that. Me myself, I am a level 3 candidate for CFA, and I've been appearing. I was supposed to appear in May, but the COVID-19 happened and the exams never happened.
Right.
So waiting for my attempt for that. But as for the CPA goes, that shortly helps. So for, like I would suggest that if you actually want to get into that field in accountancy, then come to US, do a master's course, maybe in accountancy or in finance or risk management. And along with that, you can start your CPA over here. There are like certain basic requirements, which are like certain credit hours. So credit hour is a system that for each year of undergrad or college education, you get 15 credit hours. For CPA, I guess the requirement is 60 credit hours in some states and maybe a bit lower in some other. So you need to have like at least 4 years of college education to start your CPA exams. And it is just a set of certain question papers that you have to pass, and then you get the CPA license. And CPA license is like taken very seriously by a lot of companies. They have like job profiles which specifically require you to have a CPA. So doing that after coming over here is an advantage. Same goes for CFA as well.
Okay, fair enough. So I think CPA is something if you want to get into accounting related profiles, and
Yes,
CFA is something if you want to get into finance.
yes.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Also, there are questions about work-life balance. How's the work-life balance in US?
Well, I would say that everywhere the situation is kind of similar, but it's a bit different depending on what roles you have. For example, like your role may involve having uh, quarter ends as very hectic, you can say. You may be required to work on weekends. You may have like 10 hours, 12 hours work week daily for certain weeks. But like I would say that over here, the culture is that you work hard for 5 days, then you enjoy during the 2 days weekend that you have. So that is like how the work-life balance works over here. If you get into a good company who appreciate having a good work-life balance, then you can assume that you are not going to have a lot of long hours, and that the company is going to look after you. They're going to provide you benefits and all the different holidays as well. And when you go on vacation, they're going to respect that. So I can say that the work-life balance is pretty good depending on what kind of company you get into.
Right, right. Fair enough. Also, one social question that has come: do people from Asia face, discrimination over there, or how? I think whatever we
I
do.
would say I would say that in the companies when you work, you don't actually face those. But as a normal human being, when you walk on streets or something like that, you may experience it once in a while, like once in a year or 2 year. But like it can happen. Like there are different kinds of people everywhere.
Hmm.
But I would say that the majority of US population is very welcoming and they're very helpful. Specifically at work, the environments are really good. Uh, you may see some politics, but where like everywhere there is politics in work. But
Right,
I can
right.
clearly say that I have never faced discrimination at work.
Okay, okay. Amazing, amazing. Okay. So, thank you for your time, for all the questions that I see are not generic questions, are specific questions. So, we can take specific questions some other time. So, thank you, Anuj. Thank you for giving us, your this time, and um, best luck, and hope you get a green card soon over there. And and if not, then you are definitely welcome in India, and we would want to definitely meet you. So so thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jinesh. Thanks for this opportunity and thanks for your team as well. Like, I actually wanted to do this. Like, there is one thing that I would like to say is that when I was applying for the colleges, I didn't had much guidance, and there was a batch of 50 students for GRE classes.
Right.
I was the alone who was from a commerce stream. There was one from
Okay.
bio and rest everybody from engineering.
Hmm.
Even after coming over here, people just assume is that you are Indian, you must be doing technology.
Right.
But when I tell them, no, I'm doing finance, they get shocked. And they don't realize that people can actually get into it through master courses. So that is one thing that I would really like people to know, that there is a lot of information on online to different universities. And you can obviously, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help people and answer their questions over there as well. So just be informed, and don't believe on misinformation. There are like many counselors available as well who can help you.
Right, right. So Anuj is also available on LinkedIn. You can search him on, by his name Anuj Maheshwari. And also, if you have any other questions, you can ask the admins of the groups wherein you are. And also, we'll be posting this interview on YouTube. So if you want to again have a look at it, we will post the link on the groups. And up next we'll be having another set of interviews with people who have gone to Canada, Singapore, and we'll try to get other people who have achieved great feat in their life as a CA. So thank you Anuj, and thank you everyone for coming, and hope to see you soon in the next session.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, bye bye.